disinfected. So those are the two primary regulatory changes that we're dealing with. Just from a day-to-day operation standpoint, the coarse solids removal that was originally designed into the plant, so there's a grit removal system and a fine screen. Neither of those are operable today. They have failed. So that allows a lot of these coarse solids, rags, plastics.
Is that identified as the ratifier?
Excuse me?
Is that identified as the ratifier?
Ratifier?
Yeah, it's the machine where it comes out of the lagoon and it all goes into, I think it's a red machine that's down there. It has like a dolly or a pulley to it, where it rotates and it's supposed to dump the solid.
Like an auger?
Container.
Like an auger?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it dumps it, but it's only partially open to just catch the solids and then allow the liquid to go through. And that's been like that for years.
So that's great.
Yeah, so there's two things right there at the influent before it actually goes to the aeration system. There's a grit removal, and that's like they have different definition of the size of what grit is, but it's sand and gravel and that type of thing. That stuff's really heavy. Then we have screen, also a fine screen that takes out plastics and stuff that's lighter that's not going to settle out. Both of those have failed. Neither of those are, and you're right, I don't think they've been in operation for many years. The problem with that is two things. About 10 years ago, the only upgrade of any significance at all to the plant was when they replaced the aeration system in the oxidation ditch in the biological treatment. They took out rotors and put in these diffused air. So it has blowers and it diffuses air, and that's where you get your biological treatment. But those diffusers are made of a rubber material. So the more of those coarse solids, like the grit that gets into that aeration basin, they just tear up those diffusers. So you can go down there and see some of the areas have real fine bubbles coming up, and some of them looks like a whirlpool. The whirlpool, that's where the diffuser is torn and it's letting too much air out, so it's not really efficient that way. All of that material also continues all the way through the process. So it'll get in the sludge, which, if it's land applied, farmers don't like all that trash getting out of their fields. So that's caused the city to have to spend more operations money to ship their sludge elsewhere because we can't land apply it or nobody wants it on their fields. That grit and all those solids also get into pumps, tear the pumps up prematurely, where they're not getting their full life out of them. And then now with the new disinfection requirement, we have a UV system on the back end of the plant before it discharges to the creek, and all of those plastics that, what doesn't get caught up in all those other different processes, they're going to show up in that UV system and cause problems. So that headworks is a very important part of the project to keep the longevity and reduce operations costs. We also don't have adequate sludge storage capacity. So I mentioned the ability to land apply. Right now we're not land applying because there's too much trash. Nobody wanted the sludge on their fields.
So what's stopping there? What do you do with it when you can't apply to the fields?
They're trucking it to another facility. So they're paying trucking to get it to a different facility that'll take it.
So if you fix one thing, it kind of resolves several problems.
Yeah, there's several things going together will reduce overall operations costs, certainly. But we have to have it in storage a certain amount of days to meet the EPA requirements. And even if we had everything ready and the ability to land apply, which they've been working toward, trucks been fixed and that type of thing, but it has to sit in storage for so many days. And if the fields are wet or if it's frozen or something like that, we don't have enough storage to do that. So we have a part of the project will be an additional sludge basin as well.
So you have waste that dumps into the watershed because we get these heavy rains. Do you think that possibly putting in some smaller lagoons as overflows would kind of help resolve that, keep the solids in the mix, and take the liquids and transfer that over to some smaller lagoons, but you could do that around the chipping yard, off each lagoon, and I think that would resolve the problem of waste going into the watershed.
Sure. So what this project is doing is going to look at the plant itself. There's going to be future projects that will look at the collection system and try to reduce the amount of extraneous flows that are getting into the system. So reduce the amount of flow that's getting there, the rainwater, groundwater, and so forth. We are going to be going to be maximizing the use of those existing lagoons out there for that very purpose of what you're saying. We're going to improve those to where, and actually put a weir, almost like a clarifier weir, to where that clean water goes into the weir and then is discharged. Yeah, it separates it out and then it retains the solids. So that's going to help that process. So that's a very good point.
And I think, that's a good start. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that would get the EPA and DNR on our backs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me ask you, several years ago, I was on the council when we wanted to do the UV light, when we had an engineer on site at the time.
Okay.
And it was around a $300,000 proposal. What is the proposal on that today?
So 636,000 is our current estimate. Yeah. And we've seen that. We've seen all costs associated with water and wastewater just to that almost same level. Of course, I don't know how many years ago that was, but even just in the last,
Probably 5
yeah, just in the last couple of years, it's just increased exponentially almost. So we have certainly a large amount of improvements to make that we have to make. I mean, if we have the mandates that EPA tells us we have. Then we also have just the day-to-day operations, the broken down equipment and so forth that has to be replaced. That if we don't do that, then we're going to be in violation and we're going to be forced to do so or fined by EPA. So we have to make the improvements. The question is what's the best way to finance? What's the best way to pay for it? So that's why we're here tonight, is to talk about a bond issue. And by far, the most economical way to approach this would be an approval of a bond issue that allows us to borrow money at interest rates. So, if, say, the bond issue does not pass, then we'll be borrowing money on the private market at whatever the interest rate of the day is, and we'll have very limited, if any, access to grants. So we'll be borrowing the full amount of the project, and we'll be borrowing it at the day's interest rates, which we all know have increased over the past year or so. So with an approved bond issue, then that makes us eligible to access the State Revolving Fund, which is it's federal dollars that run through the state for water and wastewater improvements. And that allows the city of Dixon to borrow that money at 30% of the market interest rate. So just kind of round numbers, if the current interest rate is 6% on the private market, then we'd be able to borrow at less than 2%. So there's a significant savings on the amortization just right there. Also, if you borrow your money through the SRF program, then we'd be automatically eligible for some grants through that same program. But you have to borrow money through the SRF, which requires the approved bond issue. So it's all tied together. So it'll be a competitive process, but we meet the eligibility criteria for up to about $3 million in SRF.
Plus
grants.
you have probably, what, $2.5 million left on the existing sewer bond?
That's correct.
And you guys are looking at, what, 6.5 figures?
It's a total of $8 million.
8 million?
8 million in improvements was the total project cost.
I think that's rather exuberant.
It's a lot, there's no question about it. Which is why we're looking for all of the best options for paying for that.
I don't see any way that Dixon can sustain an $8 million. There's no way. I don't care how many millions you got in the bank, there's just no way it can sustain it.
It all depends on how many dollars in grant funds that we can get our hands
Of
on.
course, you're not guaranteed.
They're not guaranteed as of
You
today.
apply, it doesn't mean you get it.
That's true. It'll be a competitive process, but we are eligible for those funds.
So what would be the objective to just putting in the UV line and getting ourselves up to a class B? And then taking the lagoons and using that, put lagoons in and use the 2.5 that you've already got on the existing sewer. And what, you guys have about $500,000 from grants or something like that from the state or whatever? I think it was. So you're talking about $3 million. Okay, that's half of what well, that's about a third of what you're going for. But the point is if you get it up to a class B, that takes DNR and EPA a little bit out of the equation. Okay, so you don't have all that stressor. And then if you replace all the water meters, you might get a true account of what we're really using in the city, because the ones we put in were used. And I'm sure that they're not anywhere near the capacity of getting true figures. So you figure if you do that and then you get a gain on that, you can take that money. And I walked through that plant several years ago with the technician. I was down there for about 4 days and I learned the whole procedure. And I know for a fact that there's valves down there that you either have to have them completely open or completely shut. There's no open or close or whatever. And what he said it was a ratifier, the thing that comes out that separates the solids from the liquids. And it used to dump it in a bin and then dispose of it. But the thing is that thing is only open about that far. That's to keep the solids back. Okay? And that could be part of the problem why we have some overflow and we have these heavy rains, because it's not moving that water fast enough, because we got solids that are blocking it. Okay, and then there was one clarifier running for 10, 12 years. So, as a council member, I looked and we had $300,000 on the water side. This is what we had gained from qualifying for the bonds, okay, for water and sewer. And there was $300,000 in the sewer side. And I asked what we could use, because I wanted that clarifier up. And all it took was a skirt. And we had one of the technicians that literally rebuilt that whole system, the sludge arm, the motors, everything. Okay, and it works full capacity just like the second. Because my point was, if we have the only one and only clarifier goes down, we don't have a sewer plant. Okay, there's no way to move the water. There's no way to purify it and send it back out into the watershed. And so that was what I had tried to do. And then I understood that we were supposed to put a third one in, because that's why they shut the dog pound. You know anything
I don't know
about
about the dog pound.
that? That was the original one, to put the third in.
Just to clarify a few terms here, adding the UV disinfection at the 800 and some thousand, obviously that's a small component of the overall project. So just by adding that, that's not going to fix all the cities.
I didn't say that. All I said was just get it to a class B.
And that
Because that's a
disinfection,
secondary disinfection, which puts you into a class B.
the disinfection itself has nothing to do with the classification of the sludge. The Class B
I was
sludge,
talking about this much.
that's the only Class B that
I was talking about UV purifying water and secondary disinfection before you dump it into the watershed.
okay. Yeah, I'm not familiar with the Class B
But that's what we're supposed to
nomenclature.
be. We were supposed to be that for 12 years, 10 years.
Diane, you do realize though, like, and I don't mean this in any manner, but you do realize this isn't something that's happened since you were off the council. This was actually from when you were on council, and unfortunately it was never taken care of. And I'm the one with this current council that went and got us the extension, and we're still dealing with the same problem.
I understand, but I was the only one person that was interested in doing this.
I just wanted to make sure you didn't think this was a new issue.
If you have 6 members that are against you, I mean,
I understand that. I just want to make sure you.
I know, I understand, but I pushed for this for years.
Okay.
And, I did clarify.
So then you know, Diane, we don't have a choice. It has to be done.
I understand, you guys are between.
And in order for us to get it done, Diane, we have to take out some type of bond. That's in order for us to get to hopefully we get to the.
I don't think that 6 or 8 million is, I just.
Well, we have to have the bond on the books to get that money.
Okay, so the last
I
time.
think Jeff would explain.
That's
a
not
little
saying
bit.
we're going to use all that money, Diane.
Yeah.
So please don't get that interpretation.
We
Well,
don't want
even
to-
if it doesn't get voted on, you guys aren't guaranteed to get that money.
No, Diane, but we have a great chance of using it. So just
It's
say
not
if
voted on, you don't qualify for it. You have to have the ability to borrow at the bond market in order to qualify for all of these grants that are even available. If we don't have the bond money available, then the grants, we just don't qualify for it at the point to apply for them, basically, right?
Okay, so here's what happened the last time we had the bonds, because I was on the council at the time, okay? In order to qualify for those bonds, we had to raise the rates on the utilities, okay? Then we had to keep that money in the bank accounts. That's what I was talking about, the 300-some thousand for water and sewer, okay? That had to stay there in order for us to get.
you're talking about the bond payment, right, Diane?
I'm not talking about qualifying for the bonds to get them, the initial ones that we're paying for, that we've been paying for years.
I think right now, though, we have the rates where we can qualify to.
So we don't have to raise the rates.
There'll be no rate increase. If anything, we insinuate, and we hope, I mean, honestly, we did raise the rates this last year, correct?
Last 2 years.
We adjusted for the.
We adjusted for the commercial side of it, which is like all the apartments and so on, which we definitely got our, fair share of flack for that. But as far as like the individual citizens or, household, your household or Ed's household, we didn't raise them, and we don't anticipate doing that. It's just, we have to do this. Like, trust me, do you think the last thing I want to come out here and do is ask our citizens to vote for $8 million bond? No, I wish there's other ways to do it. But in order to us to get our city in the right avenue, we have to do that. We have to have the $8 million or the $1 million sit over here in order to get the grants. It's a messed up system. I understand it's messed up. I think it's messed up, Diane. But that's just,
Yeah, it should have been done years ago.
it's their rules, Diane. We don't have a choice on it. I mean, you got the government that's making the rules up here. We don't have a choice on it. So we're just trying to make the best of a bad situation, so.
Anyway, continue, I'm sorry.
That's good. I mean, as the mayor mentioned, voting of the bond issue itself doesn't obligate the city to borrow that much money. So it's all about how much, once the bond has been approved, then the DNR will go through the grant evaluation process. So it's hard to say until we have them voted how much grants is going to be available to the city. So you're exactly right. We don't know what that is yet. And that'll be determined, later in this year. So, and then just by voting it, that doesn't mean the city's going to keep borrowing that amount. They only borrow what is necessary to do the improvements.
So let me ask this council. Where are you getting the money to pay for this when you do get it? Where are you going to get the money to pay for this bond when you do get it? Because I figured on 6 million, roughly 38,000 extra a month. Where are you coming up with 35,000?
There's a lot of what is there, because remember, we're banking, which we can't do that, but we're in city banking, we have a very good chance of getting a lot of these grants. So when we break it down in all different grants, I wish I had the numbers, do you have the numbers, Mary, of how much we could potentially only end up. I want to say it was like, when we did our workshop, I think we could get it down, please correct me if I'm wrong here, we could get it down to almost like $2 million or something.
That we would have to borrow.
That we would actually have to borrow. The rest of it would be in grants. So yes, we're asking for this $8 million because that's the rules they can make us, so we're all clear. They make us obey by those rules. We have to get the approval for the $8 million in order to get the other funding, okay? That's not to say we're going to use that. We think we can get down to $2 million. Well, then if we chip in some of the money we have already currently set aside in our savings and so forth, we can get that down to maybe 1.6, 1.5. We can afford that, Diane.
Well, yeah,
I agree.
what I'm worried about is we have water I don't even drink and I don't even give to my dogs. Yeah, I had to get a water softener system because it gave me sores on my head and made my hair fall out. Okay, but here's the point. If you guys are going to get this money and you can't come up with the grants and everything else, I mean, then we're just kind of stuck in a pickle. You know, I mean, because they're not guaranteed.
What's our other option, Diane? There's
The
no other
other
option.
option I would say is just use what you got and just,
But should we go for the best and actually have maybe some of it be paid for with grants? I mean, come on, if you're sitting up here, would you spend your own money, or if somebody said, hey, if you ask to borrow this much money and go get a loan, not to say you have to use a loan, but you might get 90% of it paid for, you probably would get the loan, Diane. I mean, that's how we're looking at it.
I mean,
And that's the best way.
yeah.
Diane, if it makes you feel any better, I'm with you 1,000%. I would much rather spend the money towards the water system. I'd rather do, we have zero problems with sewer lines out of a month of everything, so it's really hard to get everybody to grasp this, right? But unfortunately, it's not us grasping this, it's the EPA and DNR saying that you have to do this. The bad thing is really, if we're upset with anybody, it should be them, because they come and give us a mandate, but don't tell us how you're gonna pay for it. So for us as a struggling city, a very small city, I don't know how, we're doing fairly well financially, I don't know how some of these other cities do it, guys. But I'm with you on that, Diane, I mean, honestly, that's something we both agree on.
Well,
But I'm just playing by the rules they give us, and that's the only way I know to do it,
well,
so.
I know it's a man.
doing nothing's not an option, because they told us we'll get fined like what, every day that we do nothing.
Yeah, that's probably pretty hefty.
So, I mean, we have to do something. So this is kind of our solution to
I had to
try
jump
and
through, yeah, sorry.
No, you're wrong.
I
I'm just
had-
trying to jump in.
Yeah, I had to jump in through hoops, and I'm literally like, this is coming from somebody, you know, right after I took office as mayor, I had to jump through hoops to get the extension. Like, I literally called you guys up and said, hey, I don't know what I'm doing, can you help me? And they did. So, I mean, but again, we're running out of time, so we have to do something. And it's taken us a little bit of time to get an engineer on, you know, get through site planning and so forth. So that's where we are now. Now we have to take it to the voters. We don't have an option, Diane. I mean, we need people like you, we need everybody out there telling people whether we disagree or agree on different options. This is something we all have to, if we want the best of our city, we have to agree on.
I just
There's not
don't
an
want to see,
option.
I just don't want to see this project falter in any way, and then the citizens have to eat the cost, because in essence, when you're talking about the $8 million, that's going to double, if not triple, water bills. And these people even have a hard time paying their little bills that they pay now.
I'm with you, Diane.
And that's what scares me the most.
Diane, you can hate or love me, you can hate or love the council, right? But if I've ever said I'm gonna do something with this, with it in the city, and this is where we have to be real with each other, right, Diane? I've done that, okay? I'm telling you, if we get it approved, we will spend the money the most cost-effective way we can with the grants, Diane. But at the same token, it's just, it is what it is. Okay, I mean, we don't have an
I
option.
understand.
It's one of those things we all have to be on the same board.
I just want to make sure we talk about all options here. You know, make sure we put
Diane.
everything on the table and we see it from all different
How much
angles.
cost
That's all I'm
adjustment
saying.
in the last year?
I mean, Diane, we went, trust me, this is one of the few things, I came up with two things since I've been, you know, with the city that I haven't had an exact easy option for, and this is just one of them. And it's literally as simple as that. We don't all have to agree with each other, but if we love our city, we want our city to do good, and we want, obviously, I think everybody here can say we don't want EPA, you know, finding us, because you want to talk about something that will definitely 100% raise our water bill, because the money's got to come somewhere, Diane. And if they start finding us, we have to come with that money. So our option is to take to the voters. I assure you, we will get a good 80% of these grants, if not more. We've done really, really good this last year and a half, 2 year period of time of getting grants. So I don't want to say we perfected it, because we haven't, but we've gotten much, much better than we were in the past. There was a time, Diane, when you were on council, and you know this, when we were on council together, Diane, how many people told us the city of Dixon couldn't get a grant? Do you remember that? I mean, I remember that, Diane, and now we're getting grants every couple months. I mean, it's happening, Diane. So it's one of those things, like I said, we all have to be on the same page about. I mean, there's not an option there. I mean, I can't make the voters vote yes, but that's really unfortunately what has to happen in order to get EPA up our back. So we need people like you out there telling the other people that this is the way it has to be. And if you have any, you know, other questions or concerns, I encourage you to come to the meetings, Diane. I mean, literally, we've
I
talked.
have to take off work to come.
I know, we've talked about it, Diane, but like, literally, there's no option there. I mean, yes, we can put some fat off, I think we've cut some fat off, really, of it than what it originally
And
was.
see, the reason why it didn't get done by other councils, there was no pressure.
I don't know,
There was no pressure, so it just got slid back and slid back. It was on the back burner for years.
I think maybe you didn't see the pressure, I mean, I'll agree to disagree with you on that, because there's some letters that were maybe you never seen them when you were on the council, but there were some definitely letters back in that era that they come through
I
that.
never saw that.
And that's why I say, maybe you didn't see them, but I promise you the pressure was there. Because shortly, I don't even know how long it would have been mayor now, 2 years. Shortly after taking mayor, 2.5, whatever years ago, I got a letter stating, hey, this has to be done in like 2-month period of time, and it's impossible, so.
It was supposed to be done in 21. And
Yeah, that's when I got the extension.
Mayor was able to get that extended to 25, 26, 25.
I mean, I'm glad it's getting done,
20.
because it needs to be done, you know, but the point is it just kind of scares me, this kind of figures, because this is a 1,500 population, I guess, still, and we don't have a whole lot of revenue.
Well,
And, you know,
it scares us
begging
too.
to get money, you know, it's just kind of scary, because it could be just a system that falls, and I just don't want to see Dixon go in, because somebody's trying to do the right thing, that's all I'm saying.
Sure.
I'm just saying, let's put everything on the table, look at everything, and see where we can cut costs and do this and do that, and I'm sure you guys have done that.
And we have, and we'll continue to do that. I mean, this is just another step towards the right direction. We have to take it to the voters. We had that, let's do it now, and so we can start working hopefully on a project if we get this approved. If not, we're gonna run out of time. I mean, that's our issue.
We're
We're
running.
gonna have to find a different avenue to get money. You know, that's just how it is.
This is the best option, though, I promise you, as we all went back and forth on it. And there's a very, very, very good chance we'll get 80 to 85% of it paid for with grants. They do have some sympathy for us out there at an upper level, so.
That answers all my questions.
That's all I have.
Have you got anything? Or it's your time to shine, or what you do? Mr. Baker?
I think I'm not a member of the city. What exactly is this $8 million going to be spent on?
Well, all the things that we talked about earlier and that you and I visited on last week. So, I mean, it's improvements throughout the plant, both to take care of the regulation changes, disinfection and peak flow conveyance, but also just the operations of the plant, the failing equipment that's 40 plus years old.
It's fine to speak in general terms, but when you think about $8 million, let's get a little bit more specific. Where is this money going to be spent at?
And we have that, Robert, you're more welcome to.
So nothing on infrastructure, right?
This is all of the plant. It's just,
Okay.
I'm asking it here because as you know, these videos go up for the public.
That'd probably be something, honestly, and I'm not opposed to it, you probably want to take and get copies of Robert, we'll provide this for you, and then post them with that, because it breaks it down throughout there.
that's what I
In
can
order to, that book is pretty much, I mean, that goes through verbatim of what we plan on doing, so you're more than welcome, and I'll make sure there's no charge to you. If you want a copy of that, Robert, we'll make you a copy of it tomorrow, and you're more than welcome to post that if you'd like, okay?
And if you, as I mentioned to you before, if you have any questions, you can give me a
Well,
call.
that's why I'm asking. I know when we talked, you talked about rebuilding the clarifiers, putting in that extra holding tank down by the cliff, sludge tanks for the liquid overflow.
Mhm.
This is what maybe put that information out to the public.
Sure.
And this would be, like I said, this would be a good time. It's not too much detail, but still a little bit more.
Sure, I can talk through real quickly the kind of itemized breakdown. So the influence screening structure and the grip removal, that was the headworks, that just what we were talking about earlier, takes all the grit and coarse solids out of the flow before it gets through the process. We have secondary clarifier mechanism replacement, intermediate pump station, because of the elevation of the plant itself relative to the floodplain. The UV disinfection system by regulation has to be able to discharge during a 100-year flood. So which means we're going to have to elevate it above your current elevation of the outfall pipe. And it doesn't run uphill, so we have to pump that up. So there's a pump station involved with that. The UV disinfection, there's a sludge pump station, upgrading the equipment, replacing equipment. Then we have wet weather disinfection, so the UV that we were talking about earlier is just what goes through the secondary treatment process. The wet weather is what is being blended in with that, so that's an additional disinfection system that only operates during wet weather. And then the aerobic digester, which is the sludge basin that we talked about. So that's the itemized list that makes up that total.
Is there any more questions?
Does the design flow stay the same?
Yes,
The one you have
that's correct.
Yes, I have no more questions. I guess we'll conclude our meeting. Thank you guys for coming out. Thank you.
Thank you all.